Today, we're going to be discussing how the simplistic nature of the Zoom iOS application can potentially lead to remote code execution on target Mac and PC machines. So, with the whole pandemic and everything like that, work from home, school from home, uh, has led to a need in uh, better teleconferencing software. And Zoom and Microsoft Teams really have cornered this market. Zoom being the biggest one for individuals, schools, and even offices. So as you can see, Zoom exploded in popularity pre-May of 2020, really when the pandemic kicked off, which is great. There is a need for teleconferencing software and work from home, school from home, and things like that. So it has its pros and cons, and the cons of Zoom is what we're going to be discussing today. So, over the past few years or so, you may have noticed that Zoom has been in the news quite a bit. A lot of bad press for them. It is well deserved, though, so don't feel bad. Work from home, darling. Zoom is a security and privacy disaster, an FBI warning. Not sure how credible that one is. Security flaw lets them hijack your Mac cameras. Senators say it deceived users over security claims. Their boss apologizes and promises fixes. And another one, parents and students likely have heard of, is the Zoom bombing. And we're going to discuss right now why Zoom bombing isn't what you think it is. So, Zoom bombing. Zoom bombing is essentially nothing more than a buzzword that makes a simple prank look to be worse than it actually is by including the word bomb in it. So, there are tools out there that automate the process of finding valid Zoom IDs. One that comes to mind is called Zoom Brute. It's a Python script. You can find it on GitHub and experiment with that. But an example of Zoom bombing is someone in an online high school class leaks or purposely posts their Zoom class ID, their meeting ID online. For this example, let's just say they posted on Twitter. So individuals who are not enrolled in that class and have no business being in that class can see that Zoom ID meeting and join the room. So that's exactly what a Zoom bomb is. A bunch of people join the room that aren't meant to be there and are generally disruptive, inappropriate, and cause issues with the host being the teacher most of the time. And it's just bad for everybody's education. So, Zoom's solution to this was to implement a waiting room feature. And the waiting room feature is basically you join the room and then you have to wait for approval in order to join the main room. Usually, approval from the host. Now, oftentimes in my experience, this is not configured correctly, and that anybody who joins a waiting room, anybody will be able to admit them because the host has not properly configured the security features of their that given meeting. So if it is configured correctly, it does help. Although by the end of the video, you will see why the waiting room feature is worthless if you have any creativity at all. So to switch gears, we're going to talk about iOS applications. In the development of nearly all iOS applications, or any application in general, really, Boolean functions are used. And a Boolean function is a code which asks if a certain value is true or false. So, Boolean statements are chained with conditional statements, if this, then that, to allow or deny access to various functions of a given application. So, an example of this is a function in an app checking which version you have installed. So, An example would look like is the version 1.0, and it will either return a 1 or a 0. 1 being true, this is version 1.0, 0 being this is not version 1.0. And then that's chained with if this is version 1.0, do nothing. If this is not version 1.0, send the user a message to update the app. You get it. So it's very simple, a simple explanation of something much more complex. Next, we're going to be talking about jailbroken and rooted devices. This is where the video picks up. I'm not going to spend any time explaining or discussing simple concepts. If you do have questions, just Google it. From now on, when phones or apps and are mentioned, it's going to pertain to Apple products only. Um, so using a jailbroken iPhone it makes it actually really easy to modify applications to access locked functions or make an app behave the way you want it to behave. Next, we're going to talk about distributing material. So in this example, let's say it's my birthday and I have a birthday invitation in a text file. Now, replace my birthday invitation in a text file with whatever is most applicable to you. You get the idea. So it's my birthday, and I would just want to distribute my birthday invitation via Zoom to everybody's computer, maybe necessarily without them wanting it. So it's a text file, and our goal is to place it on somebody else's computer so they can attend my birthday. A disclaimer here, this is not a tutorial. Don't take this information as a tutorial. It's not. Don't replicate what is talked about here. Learn from what is covered and form your own ideas. Everything here is completely fictitious and holds no real world value. So, with that said, the Zoom iPhone application. In order to see what is going on behind the scenes of iPhone applications, it needs to be converted into a readable format. So, unfortunately, it's just not as easy as drag and drop it onto your desktop. First, you need to crack it or decrypt it. Now, there are several things you can do without a decrypted application. You can go into the container where the application is stored and there's property list files you can alter, but really nothing meaningful. So there's several pre-made scripts already available that do this for you. One is called Cracker 11. It's based on BF Inject. I can show you that here. So here it is on GitHub. Check it out. It's very simple to use, very useful. So now that you have decrypted your application of choice, in this case, Zoom, you have a decrypted file. So what do you do? What do you need to do in order to read the information or look at what you want to look at? In this case, we're after Boolean functions, their names, and which functions are called as a result. So in order to do this, you need to dump the headers and the classes used within the app file. So this is best done with a tool called class dump, and it's very simple to use. You can see that here on this GitHub page. Super useful, great tool if you are into looking at how applications work, altering them, breaking them, things like that. So check this out. This is what I use all the time, and it's proven to be very, very worth it. So now to switch gears again here, we're going to cover the perks and privileges of being the host of a Zoom meeting. So let's just open Zoom here. And we will start a new meeting with just me in it. All right, so I'm the sole participant and the host of the meeting. And what we're really interested in here is this tab, the security tab. So all the host privileges that regular participants do not have access to. You can lock the meeting, enable the waiting room, which we talked about, hide people's profile pictures as they can potentially be offensive to others. Um, and this is the section we're really interested in, especially when it comes to Boolean functions. Allow participants to. Now, if you've dumped the classes and the headers, you should see exactly where this is going. So share your screen, chat, rename themselves, unmute themselves, and start video. Now, this actually isn't all of the functions that users are allowed to do. There's actually hidden functions that aren't shown in the app by default, such as file share, which we'll talk about, the ability to rename other participants, um, enabling and disabling the ability to private message other participants without the host knowing, change other people's profile pictures, kick people out of the chat, and other stuff like that that Zoom does not enable by default. And I don't think there actually is options to enable those, even if you are the host of the meeting. So another important thing is that you can suspend participant activities indefinitely until you choose to enable them again. So with the Zoom application, the chat function is also important for what we're doing. We'll cover that later, as well as the share screen. Um, and you can go to your advanced sharing options. And if you're a participant in the meeting, which you can actually use, you can share a link as well, and it will take everybody to that website. Another important thing to consider. So we're done with Zoom for now. I'm just going to end that meeting and get rid of the garbage client and switch back over. All right, so putting all of this information together, all these exclusive features of being the host probably makes you want to be the host of a meeting, doesn't it? And that's exactly where we're headed, as I'm sure you could have guessed. So remember the example of how applications use Boolean functions to allow or deny access to certain functions. So you can see where this is going. Now that you know the locations of your Boolean functions and other values, integers are able to be changed. I'll let you know that for your profit in this project, you could call it. Um, now you need a way to use your changes, to implement your changes. That is done with a jailbroken device and Theos. So what Theos is basically, I'm not an expert on Theos. I've used it, but you can essentially modify the application on your phone, right, or deploy it to your phone. So since jailbroken devices support code injection, obviously you can use Theos to create a tweak in the form of a Debian file, which is then installed on your device, um, making code injection possible in the app of your choice, in this case, Zoom. So once you've compiled it, installed your Debian file, and verified that it works the way you want it to work, then that's it. If you take the information covered in here and you do things like that, that's where this can end or not. So this Theos and Debian files are only available, they only have functionality on jailbroken devices. Now, what if I wanted to deploy my custom version of Zoom with my changes working the way I want it to work to as many devices as I would like? Well, it's actually very simple. Non-jailbroken devices, you are able to sideload applications that are unsigned applications. Um, so you can actually bundle your changes, uh, and by changes I mean the Debian file that you've created. You can patch that into the IPA file, like a raw IPA file of the clean version of Zoom, and using a tool called IPA patch. And what that actually does is it runs your changes as a dynamic library inside of the application. with all the functionalities you have included, which are altered. So now, once you've passed in your changes, you can deploy that app to all of your friends' phones and your family's phones, whoever's phone you want, using your Apple developer account. Now, for a free Apple developer account, I think it's like five or something like that. I cannot remember. And for like $99 a year, you can get up to uh, 100 deployments of this app at one time. Keep in mind, at one time. And then if you're fancy and you have like an enterprise provisioning profile, there's likely no limit, but you shouldn't be doing that with an enterprise profile anyway. So the big issue is that the information covered may or may not be current, but at one time it was, or it still may be. I'm not sure. We're obviously aware of how easy it is to join random Zoom meetings, and now we know how to take their host privileges. But about the example, you're wondering, how do we get the birthday invite onto every participant's computer, whether or not they want to be invited to my birthday or not? And it's easy. You can go into the host panel now that you're the host and change the settings to allow file share for all participants or just yourself. And you can share the file and it's downloaded whether they like it or not. And boom. Now everybody in the meeting has a copy of your birthday invitation on their computer against their choices. So obviously, in order to be effective with this method, it requires a bit of social engineering. So be creative with that or don't, because you shouldn't be doing this in the first place. So, is this a big deal? It really depends on who you are. If you're a teacher, probably not, unless there's a really annoying kid in your class who thinks this is funny or something like that. But I'm not going to convince you that this is some huge newsworthy issue. All I want to point out is that your senators and your representatives, government officials, use Zoom to conduct government business. So keep that in mind. Give it a Google search. There's a bunch of videos where they make fools of themselves because they don't know how to properly use anything like that. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking, is this a big deal or not? Another oversight that is worth mentioning, again, not as big as this, is thankfully this has been fixed, but it's still kind of funny, is that you can join a Zoom meeting or session without downloading their client, which is great because their client really sucks. In the web version, there's a text box, and you put your meeting ID in the text box, and then you hit enter, and you can join just in Chrome. So, what you used to be able to do is you can put in your meeting ID, and then you can drag and drop an unsupported file from your desktop right after the meeting ID, and it will go into the text box as like a file upload sort of thing. And now, when I say unsupported file, I mean anything that the website does not expect to be there. So use your imagination. Once you hit submit, the website will obviously give you an error because it's not expecting to have a file dropped after the ID. But what's interesting is that the everybody on the other end who's in that meeting gets booted. Their client crashes and the host crashes, and their meeting essentially is over just because you knew the ID and because you put an unsupported file type after it. So not as serious, um, not really a possibility of remote code execution, but still funny nonetheless. And yet another oversight, I wouldn't really classify this one as bad or a security risk or anything like that. It's just more silly. You may remember back hearing about how on iPhones, you could send somebody a certain string of Unicode characters in an iMessage, and when they open the message, their phone doesn't know how to display those characters. So it crashes, it hangs up, and you end up having to hard reset your phone or delete all your messages. Or yeah, it's not really a funny prank. Um, and there was another one on Instagram a while back, which is what this relates to. It relates to images with unsupported color profiles. So a while back, somebody posted like an Instagram story of an image where it says, "You cannot look at this image." And they were correct because they posted an image with an unsupported color profile so that when certain affected devices would go and view that Instagram story, they would it would crash because their phone does not know how to handle that color profile that Instagram is displaying. Um, so it would crash, it would hang up. You'd have to reset your phone. The same goes for Zoom, or used to go for Zoom. Um, if in the chat function, since when you chat, it automatically populates to everybody's client, including the host. If you send an image with an unsupported color profile in the chat, it populates to every device and it cannot be displayed. So what does it do? Is it hangs up and it crashes your whole client and the meeting ends. So with the main idea being the iPhone application, there's reasons why not every application is affected by this. Number one reason is they have competent developers. And the second reason is that they use server side checks for the core functions of the application. It's the same reason why, if you try this on your banking app and you notice that your balance is displayed as an integer, you can't just change that integer and then do what we've talked about and alter it using a Debian file and then deploy that to other devices because the bank that's on the bank server. The bank knows how much money you have and it just displays that on your screen, the client. Where Zoom has gone wrong in, I'm not sure how you can look past this, is that they've included no server side checks for the core functionalities of the app. Number one being host controls and file share. So essentially, your phone is just asking you, "Am I the host?" And it's obviously no, because you're not the host. You're not the host. You're not the host. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. But as soon as you tell it yes, there's no check against that. So the server is not checking, hey, is his iPhone really the host or is it the person on a PC is that the host? Well, we don't know because there's no check. So what that basically enables the whole process here is that there are no server side checks against that. And that's the huge issue. Now, even if there were server side checks, you might want to go digging with Wireshark a little bit. I'm sure, given Zoom's track record, you could easily find something that's worth looking for. So that's all for now. Use the ideas in here to form your own ideas, learn how things work, and learn how to make them work your way.